in Spider, right? So generally what was happening is as you executed the commands in the IPython console, it would look for the Python installation and run it, right? But Python, the language, with the language, you could have different environments. And with this update, they're enforcing that, right? So they're enforcing that if you are running commands in Spider to use the Spider environment, right, as opposed to the general Windows environment or looking for an environment. That is, I, that is really a better way to run the commands. It's more reliable, etc. Right? I think the students who were having the issues, well, the ones who contacted me, I think they got it sorted out. If anyone is having or still having issues, please let me know, right? And we'll have a look at it. Okay. And we will sort that out. So it's just a change to the commands that we would have to what we would have demonstrated. Right? But I think it would have been okay. Okay, so that was okay. So today is the last day to submit assignment 2. Right? So there are a couple of assignments outstanding, right? So just remember, those of you who have it outstanding to submit that. And also assignment 3 is due today, right? But you will have 1 more week to do that, right? So the assignment shell will close on the 22nd. Well, I also put up the course project information, right? I'm sure some of you may have had a look at it already, and we will go through that today in class, right? We'll do some theory, and then we will go through the we'll go through the project, right? No, okay. So once you all once you all submit the assignments and on Canvas, that's fine, right? You won't lose any marks for late submissions. Okay, just if you're having any difficulties, you just let me know. Mark, did you get your issues sorted out, or are you still having problems?
I reinstalled XAMPP,
Uh-huh.
ran it as administrator, and it worked. And then I closed it off and I opened it back. No, without administrator privileges, and it was working. So
Okay.
I don't know why, but yeah.
Okay, perfect. Great. That
On the work machines though, it's still having problems. But I'm
yeah.
not gonna bother with that.
Yeah, probably some policies conflicting that. So that's good that you got through it.
Yeah.
Right. So that's good news, Mark. Right. Other persons. Oh, Michael, are you there?
Hi, good day, sir.
Hi, good evening, Michael. So, Michael, I saw you got added to Canvas, right?
Yes.
Could you I know you submitted your assignment to via email, but could you just upload it on Canvas, right? And
Uh,
you could just put a note, resubmitting as you were just added, something along those lines.
Okay.
So I just download them all off Canvas and mark them.
And assignment 3 is for today as well, sir.
It is due today, yes, yes. Are you having any issues with it, like with
Yeah,
installing any of the packages?
yeah, the database. Um I went on, I had to go on ChatGPT and ask how to download it because I was looking at the videos and looking how to do it. And you know how like when you got the database, you got it to show up on PHP on my admin, right? PHP, the website, right? The local host website.
Right.
My when I got it to I got it to download, but I didn't see it update on the PHP website. Um, and I don't know how to use it on a code. I don't know how to use it alongside with XAMPP and everything. So it's like a whole like mess. So
Okay. Do you have XAMPP installed and set up?
I have some installed and set
Okay,
up.
okay, great. Are you able to install the let me see the DB connectors?
In the command prompt or in the IDE, sir?
Yeah, the IPython console. Were you able,
IPython.
were you able to install the MySQL connector?
An IPython, sir. Just now. See if I have
Yeah.
IPython on my computer.
You have Spider 6?
I have Spider 6, sir,
Right.
yeah.
So in Spider 6, there is the console. Let me share my screen. Hold on. Show you. Yeah. Let's do this like Spider. Okay. So here, right? So this is your Spider, how it should look like. And on this side, you should have your IPython console pane, right? Yours might be horizontal, depending on the layout. So you have this, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good. Did you install the MySQL connector? So did you do pip install MySQL connector Python? Were you able to run this command? Michael?
If I manage to press on, that's
Yeah.
awesome.
Because this may or may not work, right? So if I do this, so I was telling the class there was an update to update to Spider 6 that.
Oh yeah, I think I did. It said requirements already satisfied, so I did. So I
Okay,
think
good.
I did already.
Right, so you run that. So you have your connector, your Python connector set up. So in this case, what you need to do is you execute the script. Right, what is the name of the script for that assignment? Assignment 2. It will be create assignment 2, assignment 3. Yeah. It would have been to create the inventory, create the products table.
Mm-hmm.
So you,
Run it. Wait. Okay.
right, so you run that.
I ran it. Yeah, I ran it, and it said database setup complete.
Okay, okay. So if you go back now to your PHP MyAdmin, you should see an inventory table in there. Let's see if I could get myself.
Oh, yeah, inventory. Yeah, see your inventory
Right,
table.
good. So in the inventory table, in the inventory database, there's a products table. And that's the table you're going to be using for the assignment. Meaning that's what you're going to be inserting data into and updating, etc.
Okay, so looking at products, and I don't see just now. Okay, I see product ID, name, quantity.
Right. So
Okay.
it's just the table that's created, right? When you do your script, you will be adding information or data in the table and deleting and updating.
Okay. Okay, thanks, sir.
All right. Okay. If you have any questions, just reach out to me, right?
Definitely, thanks, sir.
Okay, you're welcome. Anyone has any questions regarding the assignments? Right. So remember, assignment 2 closes off tonight. So anyone still have that outstanding, just submit. And assignment 3 is due tonight, but you have until next week to submit before it closes off. Yeah, quite a bit of students uploaded already, and also some students upload the assignments pretty quickly, which is impressive. Right. And then I also am aware of, you all are in the final year of the program. So you all are working on your projects, which in itself is quite some work, right? Which is finalizing the projects and the scope and all these things. I think you all have some deliverables at the end of the semester, right? You'll have to do some presentation and submit a report. Is that correct?
I'm not sure, honestly.
Okay. Okay, I think so. I think let me see. Mark is still there. I know you did project last year. At the end of first semester, you'll have to submit some progress report and stuff, right?
I'm not doing my final project soon.
Okay, now doing this
Part-time.
year.
Yes, we were told that we have to have a presentation at the end of the semester as well as
Yeah.
submit a report.
Right. Thanks, Sarah. Yeah, that's what I thought. Yeah. So I know you all would be, quite busy with all these things. And what the point I'm coming to is, your workload is a little bit heavier than usual. So I understand if you all are a bit overwhelmed with this, this is not the only course you're doing, some other courses. So let me know if you're having any issues, and you need a little extra time, and we'll see what we could work out. All right. Obviously, we have to finish things up to meet the deadlines, to get your marks put in the grade system, etc. Right. But just keep me updated if you're having any problems. Don't wait too late into the semester. The best thing is to, actually try to make little progress as time goes on. And that's one of the reasons why I put the assignments up like this, believe it or not, that I have them due 1 week after, right? So that way you spend like maybe 1 hour to 2 hours or so on the assignments and get it completed, right? Rather than just give you the assignments and say, well, they're all due at the end of the semester, then it sort of just piles up. Okay, same thing with your projects, take your time and work closely with your supervisors to define the scope of it, right? And let them guide you, because it's easy to have too broad of a scope, and then it's not specific, right? And you end up doing a bunch of research and implementation, and that's not really necessary. So work closely with them and let them guide you into the right path, right? To get it completed as soon as you can. Don't wait too late to do work on a project. My advice is to work on it regularly, right? Every day or every couple of days, keep working on the project, because the project is sort of a living assignment, because it will change as time goes on, as you learn more information. So you want to constantly be revising, rethinking, and understanding what the scope should be and what you could do, right? So don't wait until too late. Like, for example, not working on it for weeks, and then to the end of the semester now you just want to have this influx of information to make decisions. Try to work on it very consistently. That's really what helps in the end, right? So do that. I think that works for me. It worked for me. It worked for me when I did my bachelor's, my master's, a couple of master's degrees, and my MPhil. Right, try to be as consistent as you can. We're all at the UTT, but we also have things happening in our lives, whether it's work, personal issues, family issues, etc. So there needs to be a way to balance. Yeah, many things happening. So there needs to be a way to balance and incorporate it. Things like the degree is a bit like, is that kind of a span sort of commitment. You have to commit it for some time, whether it is a semester or a year, and just get it completed, right? And afterwards, you could expand and do some other things. So I think you should do that, right? Keep working consistently on your projects and at a lower level the courses, right? So like assignments, try to get them done as soon as you can get them done. Okay, and get it out of the way basically, right? So you could work on other things and do that. All right, yeah. So the assignments, they're all up, right? Assignment 2 can submit that. There are a couple outstanding. Assignment 3 due tonight. Who's not finished could submit that, right? And there is the group, a course project, which will be in groups, right? We do it in peers. So I'll talk about the course project a little bit later, right? In case most people, yeah, we'll talk about it a little bit later. I hope you all have decided who you want to work with, right? So there are 19 people in the course. We'll do groups of 2, and there will be one group of 3.
Can I be in the group
right?
of 3 with Ethan and Gabriel, please?
Ethan and Gabriel. All right. Okay. Sure thing, Kayla. Okay. So okay, so that's a group of 3. Everybody else in pairs. Right. So after when we discuss the course, I will just record the groups, right? So Kayla, you just remind me of that. For the project, there are a couple deliverables, right? There's a report that you will do a group submission, and then there's a presentation, which is a group activity also. And then you have to do a peer assessment of the other persons in your group. Okay, that's an individual submission. That's an individual sort of confidential kind of submission, meaning the grades from that is not, I will not share them, right? It will be part of your overall grade for the course. Okay, so we'll discuss that. For the remainder of the course, it's going to be more theoretical, right? So it's a little bit not as exciting as the first couple of weeks, if you found that exciting. So we won't be doing too much hands-on stuff, right? We will be doing some more notes. What I will do is I will try to review it kind of quickly, right? Because it's more just reading, right? And I don't want to just sit and read for you. So I'll just focus on some of the main points and we'll go through it, right? So the slides will go up online. You all could review them for more, if you want to go into any point a little deeper, and we can discuss it further if you want. Today we're going to start test documentation, and that's where your project is going to be, or more documentation, right? Part of the project is there is a zip file online, a sales application, and you will have to test that application. Because remember I said in this course, you're not really going to be writing too much code for like solutions, right? You're going to write code for like testing. So that is an application. So you could open that on Spider and you'll have to test it. Now remember, it's to test the application. So there are going to be things that does not work and there are going to be some things that work, right? So it's for you to test the application and come up with your findings, etc. Let's see, what else do I have to say? That. Right, okay, so let's start with, let's go through quickly the slides for today. I think maybe after the break, we will go through the project. And let me know who you're working with and all these other things. right? And then is the only other assessment we will have will be an in-class exam down to the end of the semester, right? Just before you all present. So more information on that a little later, but just so you know. Okay, the in-class exam, you'll have to come in. Okay, I think some students, they may want to do it a little bit earlier. They might want to sit the exam a little earlier. So probably you might come in a little like in the afternoon. And for those of you who are working and have other commitments, you may come in at the evening, 5 or later. All right. Okay, so today we're going to talk about test planning, right? And this has to do with documenting the tests and executing and giving feedback. And testing is such a huge field. I didn't really appreciate this too much initially because usually when we designed solutions, so I was one of my roles was a solution architect for mobile networks, and I used to design the end-to-end transport equipment that's from the cell towers back into the mobile base, the core data centers with the mobile equipment, right? So the HLRs and stuff. And what I did is after we designed it and we configured it, we would test it ourselves, right? So we would test like the routers and the switches and test things like redundancy and failover and routing protocols and all those things to make sure it works well. And that was normally it, right? So we would set it up and then test it ourselves, and then we would test it with the customer, and then they would sign off. But one of the projects I was assigned to after some time, I was assigned to a project, and it was a customer trying to replace a legacy system that they were using for like 25 years, right? So it was a huge project because all their customer information was on that, and they had to migrate the data and then set up the new system, make sure it worked as well as the existing one, and at least as well as and better. So because it was such a huge project, they had persons from many places, experts in different areas coming in, and we had some meetings before we met with the customer. So we had meetings in Panama, and there were people from US, from India, from Brazil, and stuff like that. And as part of these meetings, we had to do presentations, basically explaining to the customer why our solution for the company was the right fit for them. And then we had to address any of their concerns regarding the migration and interoperability and this sort of thing. So we presented in front of the project manager and the account manager and all these persons, and they were pretending to be the customer. So they would ask us questions. So we had like mock presentations, and they would ask us questions and to see how we would answer and if we had answers to the questions and stuff like that. And there was this one guy who was in the meeting, and his job was just testing, right? So he was the architect for the testing part of it, and he started to talk about the depths of testing and regression testing and defects and reported defects and this sort of thing. And as he started to talk, he was talking about he had different teams he would have been responsible for, and I mean, it was kind of eye-opening for me because I would generally be responsible probably for like 1 or 2 integration engineers, and he had teams and talk about different sort of scenarios and how they expect to be testing and stuff like that. And that was actually a huge part of the project was on the testing, because they had to test at each phase to ensure things would as it was, right? And So the things we're doing in the class here is a bit of a introduction to that. Now, it all depends on the scenario, the context and the scenario, right? So if you get experience, or you continue, or you move on to work with organizations that are generally a little smaller, small projects, you may not really be able to see this as applicable, because some small organizations, you might be the person doing the installation, you might be the person doing the server stuff, the network thing, the website, you might be IT manager, it might be everything in one, right? And even some bigger organizations in Trinidad, they don't do testing in a very structured way like this. But definitely for larger organizations and large projects, they do it, and they take these sort of principles into consideration. And that's really the idea of the courses at universities, to kind of give you some foundational information, so you have an idea of what to expect when you go in the industry, right? Not everything will be applicable depending on what area you work in, right? So some of you may end up working as website developers, right? And you may never have to do anything with regards to not much as regards to networking or operating systems and this, those sort of courses. And then some of you might be on the network side and may not have to do anything on databases or much on databases. So the degree really is a sort of not general, but a foundational sort of learning for persons, and in your case for computer engineering. So the idea is when you come out of the course, you have information you could build on, right? So that's why you do like electrical systems. So you know about the fuses and breakers and breaker panels and this sort of thing. Okay, so we're going to get into the test planning, which has to do with the documentation a little bit, right? So you have to be able to plan your tests before. You have to, with the planning, right, you make it more efficient and effective. Okay, it usually is a roadmap for the entire process. Now, as part of the plan, you have to set objectives, scope. Scope is important. You want to be able to test certain things, right? And not testing too much, right? There's a concept of scope creep, where you work for you have been hired to do some job, and then whoever hired you, they want you to do a little extra, and then that could get expand to many tasks, right? So you have to be careful with scope creep. While you need to be flexible, right, you have to ensure you don't really add too much, right? You have to take into consideration resources, right? Who do you need for the testing, and the schedule when you want the testing done, right? Schedule is a big thing, right? Project management is a big area, because everybody wants their solutions developed, and they want to develop, very quickly. So you need to have a schedule that you stick to. Now, the schedule is always sort of agile, right? It changes. So you want to ensure you're on top of that. And then you have to take into consideration tools you need to test your application, right? There are open source tools, and then there are some proprietary tools. So if you need to use a tool that is not open source and you need to purchase, that has to be included in the budget, etc. Right. Okay, and it helps with ensuring the project requirements are met, right? It helps reduces risk, and also you want to have clear communication, right, with stakeholders of the project. So you need to have proper communication that may be via written communication, as well as like presentations and stuff like that, right? You want to be able to communicate in a way that everyone understands what is happening, right? And also, if you have any problems, you need to be able to communicate in such a way that the person's know and understand of it, right? Because when you want to probably purchase equipment or some sort of technical feature or software, a lot of times you have to send this request to like the the financial director, right, the CFO, and they normally sit in the meetings where you're discussing it, and like they have no idea technically how these things work, right? So you have to be able to phrase your argument in such a way that they understand the value of it, why it's important. Because they are responsible for the spending in the organization, and they are not really too keen about spending money. And that's one of the reasons, well, they like to see a return on the investment. And that's one of the things with like security and cybersecurity. There's no real, you can't really see the return on investment, because if you have a secure solution or secure network, you don't really see anything. You kind of see or notice if there's a breach. So it's something that it's a little tough, but I think persons are getting there now. They're understanding the importance of it. Right. So in testing, you have to define objectives for the testing, right? So you have to come up with some goals and what the team wants to achieve in the testing process. Right, so these goals should align again with the project requirements. So usually when they start a project, one of the first things they start is this project document that has the scope of the project and the requirements and objectives and that sort of thing. And everything that usually follows is normally referenced, or it references that project document. So that goes through the entire project. So in terms of objectives, some ones that you will see, you want to ensure that your software meets business requirements, right? So definitely whatever is required of the business, you want your project to meet that, right? And that's why, you're not going to get a project to do you're not going to, wouldn't be able to work on a project that doesn't align with the business requirements. Like you could be working in telecommunications, and then then you want to do something with the oil and gas industry, which might not align initially. And you have to find some way that aligns with the business requirement. You need to be able to identify defects, right? So any kind of bug in the software product, you need to be able to test and identify. Right. Of course, verifying software functionality, ensuring the software works as it should, and then the quality of the software, right? And that could be different things. It could be like compliance, different standards you reference. And very important, you want to reduce the risk of software failure. Okay, ensure it is reliable, it's redundant, and all these sort of things there. All right. Security in software is, paramount right now. Okay, and there's the term right now that you need to have security that is baked in and not added on, and that simply means you design your software with security in mind. Okay, so when if you're creating an e-commerce or any kind of website and you have user credentials that you need to store, you ensure it's in a database and encrypted. Okay, and with software, you want to have user satisfaction. You have to have a good user experience. And we spoke about this in software architecture and design. There are many software applications out there. Right now, software is a very competitive field because many people are able to develop software. And one of the criteria that determines the success of it is that it is oh shit, no, thanks Shivan, and I know I wasn't recording, I forgot. All right, thank you for that. Sorry about that, class.
Recording in progress.
Okay, yeah. So you want to have a good user experience with your software, right? You want to make sure it's easy to use, it's seamless, has a very intuitive user interface. and this sort of thing. When you all work on your projects, one of the things you will have to include in the design part is some design for like wireframes, this sort of things, right? So, keep that in mind when you're working on your reports. Okay, so scope of the testing, right? So you need to identify the scope. You need to identify what areas you're going to test, right? So you can't test everything because you remember you have a limited time frame. And in addition to a limited time frame, you have a limited amount of resources. You might have probably a few people testing, right? So you have to decide on what are the features or functionality that needs to be tested, and then what are the boundaries that you have to define to do those or carry out those tests. The very important is scope of testing. So let's just say you have an application, right? You might want to test a login of the application, registration and password reset. You may not be too interested in analytics and third-party payment integration, right? So now, again, this depends on the stakeholders, right? The customer, what you'll decide on. And these things change the testing process itself, because you will probably need more resources, more testers. You might need more time, right? Depending on what you want to test, you might need to purchase additional applications, right? So very important to define the scope. Do not get into a project without having some sort of agreed scope, because what is going to happen is when you develop the solution, someone is going to ask you, well, why didn't you do this? Why didn't you do that? And you have no documented reference to say, well, we agreed on this. Now, that doesn't mean that even if you agree on something, stakeholders will still come and try to ask for more. But at least you have some baseline to work with, and you have some ground to stand on and say, well, we really didn't discuss this, and you need to pay more to get that done. All right, testing approach. And this has to take into consideration different things, right? So like the software, how complex it is, the time, and the amount of resources. Now, we discussed testing approaches a bit earlier, right? So we spoke about black box testing and white box testing, right? And if you remember the black box testing, you test without really getting into the fine details of the code or the interworkings of the application. With white box testing, you get more into that. So you look at the code, the logic, the algorithms, and your testers or the persons assigned to the tester will be different, right? So if you have to do black box testing on an application, you could probably assign someone with a lower technical skill level to do that. Compared to white box testing, you might have to assign someone with a higher technical skill. So they may need to be proficient in Python or C++, a programming language, or something like that, right? And that skill level will also impact the budget, right? Generally, right? For someone who is more skilled, they normally have a higher rate to work, hourly rate, than someone who's less skilled. Okay, and then there is gray box testing, test both elements, and then exploratory testing, right? So that's just testing without any kind of formal test plan. So this one, you might probably reach out to members of the public, and just have a test going on. Okay, right, so there's some other things we talked about: manual testing, automated testing, right? So automated testing is what we've been working on a little bit in the past couple of weeks, using things like unit tests, PyTest, right? Python. And then we looked at Selenium, which was a very interesting tool, right, for web testing. Now, there's this concept of regression testing, and regression testing is important. So what that does is you would usually test your application, and then you find an error or fault, okay? So you go back into the development of it, to the development team, and they try, they fix the fault or the error. Now, what happens, right? When you fix a fault, and you all probably have experience with this programming, sometimes you fix an error in your code, and then guess what? Something else doesn't work, right? So regression testing, generally what it means is basically retesting after a change has been made. And that's why testing is kind of costly, because you will have, think about, you have a software or a solution, and there are like maybe 100 or so tests, right, that you require persons from different teams involved in. And you spend a couple of days testing that. And at the end of those days, the errors, they would create a report. We'll come to that shortly. There's something called a defect report. Right, so you create a report with the issues. So you go back to the development team. They spend a few days fixing and evaluating and fixing. Guess what has to happen? They have to do the testing again, so regression testing. So they're going to take more time, a couple of days again to do regression testing. And, out of that, sometimes some of the things aren't fixed properly. That's one scenario. And another thing is something could be not working that was working. So testing does take a lot of time, right? Don't underestimate it at all. Okay. Now, as I mentioned, you have to be able to cater and identify for resources, right? So persons that have the expertise, right? That's one. And then, you want to have the applications and the tools able to do specific testing, right? Applications are important because, as I mentioned, there are some open source applications that you could use, right? That works just fine, but, they're usually, what should I say? There's usually a commercial version to it, the one that you have to pay for, that maybe preferred, right? So let's just say you're testing something like throughput testing, and you could only test a low throughput with the open source application. And that might be suitable for your project. And you might need to do a stress test on your application. So you have to purchase additional licenses or different software. Okay, right. So we talk about personnel, right? And any personnel, they will have different roles, right? So you might have a testing team member, you might have a test leader, and then the manager, right? Different roles for them. Different tools. So there are tools for test management. There's defect tracking, and what that has to do is any defects or issues, you could track the life cycle of it, right? So like if there's a bug or issue with software code, you would post that on an application, and the developers would automatically get the data and fix it, and then send the response back to the application. It's kind of like a service desk a little bit for tracking bugs. Service desk. Are you all familiar with service desk? Basically, it's like an online sort of platform for reporting issues. If you all ever used that before. Right, so then there are automation tools, we spoke about that, performance testing tools, and then security tools. Right, so security tools does different things. With security tools, you could do activities like vulnerability scanning. Right, so you can scan vulnerabilities in applications, and then you can do things like penetration testing, right, which is good to ensure your application is secure. All right, infrastructure, right? So of course, as part of the testing team, you need equipment to work with, right? Physical equipment. And then you may need data, like test data, test customer data. If you're doing like a migration, you may need a subset of the data that is in the current live system that you input in your application. So very important, right? The test data. One issue with migration, at least, the project I was telling you all about was, remember this old system, right? So the system was used by a company for like 20 years or so. Unfortunately, the data that was in the system wasn't really standardized, right? It was, like if you had phone numbers and any phone number field, you had people putting in, or CSRs putting in the person's name, and the information, the data had to be cleaned up a lot. So that sort of data sanitization usually takes a long time. right? So like if you're involved in migration, you need to be aware of that, right? Don't underestimate the data migration until you see the data, right? So you have to inspect the data before you could give a timeline for it. Because one of the interesting things is in the projects, when you're sitting in a meeting, the stakeholders they're very eager to ask you, well, how long does it take you to do this? How long is this about router? How long it is to, they want to know. And you might say something based on your experience, which might be a sort of a good scenario. It might take 2 weeks to do something. And then when you actually get into the configuration that you have to migrate, you realize it's going to take more than that. And then they'll come back to you and say, well, you said 2 weeks kind of thing. So just be careful, right? You need to do a proper assessment. I could say something like, it usually takes 2 weeks, but we need to analyze the current configuration before we could commit to a timeline. Okay, and then everything revolves around the budget, right? So how much money do you have to test? And that cost includes the people involved, because the organization, the stakeholders would usually pay for number of resources, people coming in and working the amount of hours they work for, right? And in addition to the tools and data and this sort of thing. Right, so that's the resources, and we touched on this also. There's a test schedule. So you need to have a test schedule, at least given an idea of the plan to test the solution, so timelines and resources. So for this, one of the best tools to use definitely is a Gantt chart, right? So you all should use Gantt charts for anytime you have to propose or suggest a schedule, for any project, your projects, your final year projects, and this sort of thing. Always put the data in a Gantt chart, some form of Gantt chart. If you don't have Microsoft Project, I think there are many open source applications available, right? Look for a Gantt chart and put your activities in, ensure you put your milestones, this sort of thing, right? That's a good representation of it. So yeah, so first, you want to know your test timeline. So you want to know how long you need to do your testing, right? And you want to, as I said, you want to make sure and record your milestones and your important events, right? So anything you deem important, you just put it in, right? It might be completing testing a functionality like payments, integration to external payment provider, right? Then you want to have identify your testing activities, right? And this will kind of align with your software development life cycle, right? And what you're going to do at each stage of the cycle. Okay, so you might have your functional testing, performance, security testing, etc. Right? And then when you do that, you want to put the ordered activities in, because there may be some activities that depend on previous ones. Right? So you want to be careful that you're not testing a module that is related to another module, and then you're testing the second module afterwards. Then the first set of tests would not be valid, right? So you want to make sure you could do those tests before. So like I say, you have an e-commerce website and you're testing, updating a cart, for example, right? So you're going through the flows and you're updating your cart and you're editing your cart, but you really didn't test that the cart feature works properly, for example, putting stuff in the cart in the first place, right? So you want to make sure the prerequisite features are tested before, right? And then, yeah, you want to allocate resources to the different activities in your plan. Right, after you have all the information, you will develop your test schedule. So you will create your Gantt chart, right, with activities, and then you will review, right? So this test schedule is usually reviewed before the project officially starts. That's because stakeholders need to know that they agree with the activities and they agree with timelines. So if it is, you say, well, my testing is going to take 5 weeks, but they may like, no, we want testing to be done in 1 week. And then you'll tell them, well, no, it can't be done in 1 week because of X, Y, Z. And then, you have a back and forth and negotiation. and it might settle with 3 weeks or something like that, right? So there's lots of discussion that happens. And there's also priorities. So they might say, okay, you need 5 weeks, but these are the important things. You know, we want to check that we could log in. We want to check that payment information is happening. And that could be done in 2 weeks. Okay, we could test that in 2 weeks. And then the other stuff could be done afterwards. All right, so many times that happens. Many times a solution is accepted or handed over to stakeholders, even though some features and functionality isn't working 100%. Right, so be aware of that. And definitely communication. So as your testing starts and it starts progressing, you want to be able to communicate with the stakeholders about the progress, right? And if there are any issues, etc., that could cause delays. One of the projects I worked on had a very aggressive timeline, right? We had to set up a network in in less than 2 months, and it was very aggressive. So what they did is we needed to have meetings every day, basically reviewing the project plan, right? So project manager would go through the plan, and everyone responsible for a particular system, they would have to report on it. So it's going according to plan. This is what we did. If there are any delays, if there are any issues, any red flags, you know, this is what we had to discuss, right? So there's that communication. If there were huge delays, you know, that was communicated even further up to expect certain things. And, you know, it will be addressed differently. So sometimes they may ask for more people, so you may get more help, right? It might be that it's something that you need additional, you need to purchase more equipment, right? So depending on what it is. So communication is important, right? Communication is very important in, you know, the workplace, and especially with your line managers and stuff like that, because they need to know what is happening. In the event of any issues, remember, upper management will first try to contact them. And if they are unaware of any issues, you know, it's kind of difficult for them to properly report. Like, you know, we saw this a little bit some time ago, you know, with the cyber attack, when they reported that there was no cyber attack to the minister, and then afterwards we realized there was a cyber attack, and you know, there was a bunch of discussion around that. So communication is important. All right. So next thing is test cases. So we have been looking at test cases from earlier lectures, right? And we have to obviously define test cases, right? So we want to set up the test cases. We want to know what exactly we're going to test. We need to know what conditions and variables that we need to work with, right? So we need to set up proper test cases. So first, you want to identify the objective of the test case, right? So what is your test? What is this going to test? What features? Is it going to test login? Is it going to test adding an item to a cart? Is it going to test submitting a form, right? In the part of that, you're going to determine what is going to be test input data. You're going to put in a valid username and password. You're going to put positive numbers, negative numbers, this sort of thing, right? And then you will define an expected output, right? What is it going to be? Some of the numbers is going to be an error, right? So then you will specify the steps to be executed. So you might say, visit URL www.simpleshop.com, click login in the username field, enter Joe in the password field, enter password 1, right? So those sort of things, you need to specify the steps. And then obviously you want to document the test case, right? So you want to write up all the details. So, you know, that's why, you know, this course is such a very, very interesting course and very relevant course. So because regardless of what area or field you all are going to work in, you will be testing at some point in time. You're going to be making changes to an application, you're going to be building an application, right? You will have to test it, and you will need to have proper documentation. Right? As part of doing one of the things, the expectations are from students graduating from universities and having that kind of high level education is the ability to really do proper documentation. Right? The ability to write proper reports, to communicate well on paper, right? As well as physical, presentations, or presentations, demonstrations. So it's good to know these steps. Okay, you could always do some review of the test case, right, with colleagues, and then to make test cases a bit manageable, depending on how much you have, you could group them. You could have, okay, well, all this is related to payments. We're going to do all the payment test cases. One person, all this is going to be related to logging in, logging in, valid credentials, invalid credentials, all sort of thing. Right? Depending on the amount of test cases you have and the time, you could prioritize test cases. So we need to test these first, and that could be for multiple reasons. Right? These could be the most critical parts of the test, right? There could be other tests that depend on it. Okay, so in project management, you all ever did any project management courses as part of the program?
No.
No? Okay. So in project management, there's this concept called critical path, right? And what the critical path is the set of activities that if there is any delay to any of the activities, it would throw the project, it would delay the project, basically, right? So these activities need to happen in a sequence and need to be completed on time for the project to be completed on time. So that's a good example of prioritizing test cases. So there may be certain test cases that lie in the critical path for the project that you need to complete. Okay, and then there is test coverage. So how do you define coverage for your tests? Is it going to be on the amount of code you test? Right? Is it going to be on features? Right, so we looked at coverage from the perspective of the amount of code, lines of code that we tested. Right, so however you do your, your test case write-up is really up to you. Right, so an example is, you put your test case ID, the objective, your input, the expected output, and you can put your steps also, right? And this all depends on how much information you have. Depending on your application, it may be very much suitable to put your test cases in a table because it's not much information. But if you have an application that requires a lot of steps and it's kind of lengthy and wordy, you might do it in a kind of paragraph form with different headings, right? A table might not be the best format for it because it's kind of just going to be skewed up and people have to scroll down too much and this sort of thing, right? So you want it to be easy to read and understand. Okay, so now that we have our test cases, how we're going to set it up, we need test data, right? We need test data to test the application. So this is important because you want to ensure that you have data that tests different scenarios. You want to test different boundaries. You want to test different settings, different sort of configurations, etc. So test data is important. And you need to either probably generate this data yourself, you need to make it up, or you could use data from an existing system, right? They may have some test data in there you can use. Okay, and test data is important because it helps verify, one, the functionality, right? It also verifies performance and then security of the software and the application. The test data is important. So just some examples of test data, right? So we have normal data, so standard values like a valid login. Boundary values, right? We spoke about that a couple lectures ago, so you're all familiar with those. There could be negative data, right? So data that would probably fail situations, so a failed login, right? Or if somebody asks for age and you put like a, a negative age, things like that, right? And then there may be data that triggers some kind of exception or some system error. You want to also test that. You want to make sure that your application, your software application, can deal with any data that is basically thrown at it. Okay, you don't want data being input into the application and basically crashes, or it basically sets your system to work in an unpredictable way. Then your application is not a really reliable application because it's going to be seen as unavailable. And this is especially true if you are doing applications that are accessible by the general public, right? Because the persons will try to put any kind of erroneous data in to see how your application will behave. So proper testing is good to ensure it handles it appropriately, right? Oh yeah, so now defect management. Spoke about that. So defect management is a process, right, where defects are found. So a defect could be any issue, any kind of bug, any software logic that doesn't work, some business side. So any issue from the normal behavior that is found. So the first thing is you have to record it. So there needs to be some way to record it. You have to track it. And what tracking means, you record it and then you track the progress to see if who is working on it, what is the update, because it's quite likely that depending on the issue, it's not like an easy fix. It's not just, okay, I need to go and change this formula or assign a new variable type, or it may not be an easy fix. It may require further development, and that could take some time. So you need to track the that progress and process, right, to ensure it is fixed and it meets the requirements of the project. So there's a process for defect management. So first, as you mentioned, you have to log it, and there are many tools for logging defects, right? It's a big thing. So sometimes when you engage in projects with vendors and you're testing the software as a customer, and there's a defect, if it's like a small project, you probably just go to the project manager and say, well, this functionality doesn't work. But in bigger projects, especially when they have engineers working from, let's say, like all over the world, right? Not one engineer might be working on an issue. So you have to go on an application and then you have to upload your defects. So you say like, this is the problem and this is the issue, and you do screenshots and stuff. It's kind of similar. I don't know if any of you have experience, there's like if you have problems with like Cisco equipment or any kind of equipment like that, and you could go on the support sites for the vendors and you could create a kind of a ticket. So it's something like that, right? But this is in the more from testing side of it, not after the product or the application is sort of live. Right, so you log it, and then with your defect, you have a classification. And classification, again, is important because, they're going to have multiple defects, right? So they might have like tens or hundreds, depending on the project, and they will resolve it based on severity and priority. So severity could be how it affects the system, right? So it could affect a functionality, it could affect how it interacts with the database, how it affects login, and then its priority. So for example, there might be something like, let's just say email notification. That mightn't be a high severity, but it might be a high priority, right? Because email notification might be something that is required to get this product to work. So if it is you make a payment, you have to you need to send an email confirmation, right? That reminds me, just recently I signed up for something online and they had a form, right? An online form. So I fill out the information and I submit the form, right? I didn't get any email notification, so I wasn't sure what happened. I wasn't sure if it went through or not. So I had to call and find out. So yeah, severity and priority are two different things. Defect analysis, right? So once the defect is reported and classified, you have to analyze the defect, right? So this is it. It gets into the developing part of it. They will analyze the defect, determine what is the main issue, the root cause, right? Root cause of the problem. So there's this thing called RCAs, right? It's root cause analysis. And what those are is usually if there's a problem, there's a root cause analysis that is done to determine what is the main reason for this. And it could be that, okay, maybe there's a issue in logic, right? So it might be some sort of field that's not being calculated properly. Okay, so that's normally resolved. The root cause is first identified and then resolved. Right now, there's defect assignment, right? So to fix it, the after the analysis, the actual changing is done by assigning to someone. So it's not assigned to an engineer. So what would happen is the analysis might be done by a designer or architect, and then they will assign the defect to be resolved by a developer. So the developer now will go in and they will try to update the code or whatever it is to do to fix the defect, right? Right. After they fix, they will verify, to ensure it works properly. So that's a bit of like a regression testing, and then they will close the defect, right? So it's like think about it's like a ticket, right? So you open the ticket and you close the ticket, but specifically for defects to the software. Right. Another thing that is important is exit criteria or when you have to stop testing, right? Because you could keep testing everything on different scenarios and it would never really stop, right? Because you could test every single line of code, for example, but that's not really reasonable, right? Or every single feature. So you have to be able to define exit criteria, which are conditions that need to be met to stop the testing, right? So you stop the testing. Generally what happens is even though the testing is stopped, there are means and ways to still resolve any issues that happen, right? So it doesn't mean that the software is not still supported or you can't ask for support, but in terms of the testing part of the project, it is considered stopped. Okay, so stakeholders need to agree on this, right? Very important because stakeholders will try to ensure to get things as much things as they could get done based on the agreement, right? So important to define that. So what are things that you could use to stop testing? Right, so you can look at requirements, so requirements that were defined in the project scope. That could be something that is met and it could stop the testing. It could be that a number of test cases could be passed. So maybe you have 100 test cases and you're looking for 90 to be passed, so 90%. That could be a reason to stop. Or you could have achieved some sort of test coverage. Okay, so coverage could mean different things. If you look at features, you could have multiple features and then you could test most of them. It probably could be code if you're looking at programming code. And then another thing is acceptable performance and quality levels. So you might want to stress test your system. Okay, and you want to make sure that those performance levels are acceptable. So criteria varies from project to project, right? It depends on the project type. It depends on what your goal is to test, right? And other factors, right? Some persons may be interested in an e-commerce, who's building an e-commerce website. They might be interested in the user functionality of it, right? Logging in, adding stuff to cart, payment, etc. But then you can have testing from a security perspective. So they're not really interested too much in all that, but interested in looking at vulnerabilities on the website, looking at different sort of attacks on the website, SQL injection and this sort of thing, cross-site scripting and things like that. right? So depending on the test itself. Okay, what's important is as you continue to work, you will get more experience. And then based on the project and the discussion is going, you will know how to use your experience to test and to make certain decisions. Okay, when you have created a test plan, you want to ensure that it is reviewed, right? Because you want to ensure that all the stakeholders agree with the test plan, at least at a high level, right? So they may not know the details, they're not going to go into your code and look at these variables and say, well, that variable name is not well selected, things like that, right? But at a high level. So you want to make sure they agree with the things like the objectives, the scope, the approach, the resources, the schedule, test cases, and the test data. So things we spoke about. Okay, once that review is complete, it has to be approved, right? So your project manager would usually approve that with other persons or other managers, right? And then that document is referenced and could be modified depending on how the project goes on, right? So it is a living document, many of these things, every time you go to a project meeting, you're going to see the timeline is changing. And usually it normally gets longer, right? With timelines, there's always something that happens that you didn't expect. Okay, and you have to work extra to try to reduce those timelines. So yeah, that happens with projects. So test planning is there are obviously benefits to being a sort of taking a structured approach, right? So first, it provides a clear roadmap, obviously, because you get to have a good idea of what is being tested. You want to meet the objectives of the project, right? You want to see the activities, the resources you need, etc. Right? Minimize risks. Okay, and that is important because when you have identified your test cases, right, you could use the planning by mitigating risks and by the defects, right? Risk of the defects, and use applications to resolve that. Yes, it reduces also cost, right? Because you can more efficiently assign resources to the testing based on the planning, right? So you could say, well, okay, we're gonna have one tester working here, but guess what? This guy, he knows database stuff and networking stuff, so he could do two things, for example, right? So you could do that. It improves the coverage of the test and also the efficiency. Okay, and that test plan, as you mentioned before, right, it provides a basis for the review and approval of the testing itself. All right, okay, so
Recording stopped.
so the next thing we're going to look at is the test plan document. Okay, but before we do that, I think I'll probably stop here for today, right? We'll continue the test plan document next class. What we're going to do is we're going to go on a short break, right? So it's 6:15, right? We'll come back at 6:25, and then we'll go through the course project. All right, so let's do that. I'll see you all in 10 minutes.
So,
Yes, Gideon.
I had a question about the second part of the assignment.
Sure.
How?
How to test for the pages to verify them?
It's more like setting up the document. I was using what was there from the notes, but I don't think it's working.
All right.
Is there a specific console command you're supposed to use for it to run?
No, Well, when you say run what, the script?
The script.
Let me just share this notes. Right. So, well, I remember last class you were able to load the website, right?
Yeah, I got the website to
Right.
load.
Good. So you have the website. Did you set up Selenium, and meaning did you do install Selenium?
So I pip installed Selenium. I got that
Right.
to do. I got the Chrome driver.
Right.
At least I hope I got the exact one I was supposed to. But it said to put it in the same place that you put in the test file.
Correct.
So I just have it in the folder where the test file is, to be done in Spider.
Right. Yeah. So whatever like for example, this is my documents where you're going to create your Python script. That's where you put in Chrome driver.
Right. Okay. So
Mhm.
I did that, and while writing up the document to actually begin writing the tests, it has to open up thing, but it just doesn't seem to be opening up Chrome at all, because I don't see Chrome opening up.
So you defined everything, right? So you defined your website stuff.
Yeah, I did. I did that for the PyTest fixture and the website name that it would be able to go to it. It's still just not opening Chrome. I open up Chrome myself, but it's not like actually doing the test.
Right. Did you try it with the test site?
No.
Okay. Okay. Give it a try with the test site. All right. All you do on Canvas have the test site. Okay. So if you could download it, where is it? Yeah, it's on the website, testsite.zip. So basically what you're going to do is you're going to extract the files and you are going to put it in the XAMPP folder. And you're going to put it here, right? XAMPP, well, wherever it's installed. Most likely it might be installed on your C drive. So C XAMPP htdocs. Create a folder called test_site, and then you're going to paste all the files in there. Right? Verify that you could access it. Okay. And run this script. This script is on Canvas also. Yeah, this one is on Canvas. Yeah, this script is on Canvas, right? So run this. One thing, oh no, you did because yeah, so you ran the site, right? Yeah, you ran this. Okay, good. Yeah, so try this. If you could, I think this is not, mightn't take you too long to set up the Gideon. So if it is you want to try it while we're in class, right? And see if you get it to work. And what we could use after class, I could go through with you to get it set up. We can look at it.
Okay, sir.
Right.
Yeah, I'm setting it up now.
Okay, perfect. Anybody else had issues with the JKS, the website, the assignment?
Yes.
So for the last question, it said from the homepage index HTML, when a user clicks on the following navigation link, confirm that the correct web page titles are returned. Our Food About Us FAQs, those have titles, but Order Now doesn't have a title that says Order Now.
Right. So Order Now, when you click on Order Now, what does it go to, right? So you're going to see what is returned on the web page and what is returned as the title of that web page you're checking for. Who's that? Rahim. Rahim, you understand that?
Yeah, okay. You
Yeah.
can say that one more time?
Yeah. So the links are our food, about us, FAQ, and order now, right? Those are the links. But when you click on each link, a web page will be returned. Now, the title of that web page might be different from the link. So the our food web link might return a web page with, let's just say, menu, for example, right? So it might necessarily be the same title of the web page as the link.
Okay.
Yeah. So just look at when you click on order now, what is returned. So the web page that is returned, look to see what the title is, and you adjust your code to look for that. All right, good. Okay, all right, guys. Okay, 6:22. All right, so let's come back at 6:35, right? And again, so we'll go through the project, right? And if anyone has any questions regarding the assignment, like Raheem and Gideon, right, we could discuss that definitely afterwards. Okay, so I'll see you all in 15 minutes, 6:35. Your group, the application, right? And it is a Python-based sales and inventory management application with a GUI and a database backend. Your team, right? You're responsible for the quality assurance, and you also have to develop and execute a test plan to ensure that the application meets requirements. Now, the project requires your team, which is the QA and testing team, to prepare a test plan report, okay, and that should demonstrate an understanding of the understanding and application of the software testing techniques that we covered during the course, right? So it's very much open, and you all could use any one of any combination of techniques we discussed. Okay, so first thing, you all will have to run and test this Python-based sales and inventory management application. So the application is on Canvas. So if you go on Canvas, let me just switch here. Yeah, so if you go on Canvas, yeah, you see that down to the end here is assumption. So, yeah, you see down to the end here is the module course project, and it has the document we're reviewing now, the course project. Is also the group peer assessment, and here is the Python application, right? So it's that zip file. So what you have to do is you have to download that zip file and extract the files in here. Okay, now when you do that, you are going to execute the main.py on Spider, right? So in Spider, you just go to the main.py and you open it up, and then you press run, right? Run. Now, when you run it, I think I showed you this last class, right? But when you run it, this application is going to start up with the login screen here, and the username and password is both admin. Okay, and when that loads up, you are going to have this application here coming up, right? So that's the application you're going to be working with. By chance, anyone tried to run the application yet?
Negative.
No? All right, no problem. You could let me know if you have any issues, right? But it should run. There are no real prerequisites, etc. Okay, right. So now that you have your application running, that's the application you're going to test. What you have to do is you have to document a test plan report, and it has to have these sections. So you just, like, you have an introduction, then you're going to talk about the test scope, responsibilities, test strategy, entry and exit criteria, test environment, test approach, features to be tested and features that will not be tested. You have to do a schedule and timeline, discuss risk and mitigation. And of course, you have to put your test cases and results and end with a conclusion. So you get more into those sections soon. For the project, you will have to work together in teams, right? So we're going to sort out the teams shortly, right? In addition to that, there will be an oral presentation. So you have to do some PowerPoint slides, right? Do a quick presentation on certain aspects of your project. And then as part of the presentation, you will demonstrate at least 4 test cases. So how you executed these test cases. Right now, test cases could be executed in any way. You could choose to write a script. It could be that you just went in and did the test manually, right? So anything that, or any method that we discussed, it is up to you to choose what you want to use. And then finally, you have to do your peer assessment evaluation. So that is also on the website, on Canvas, right? The peer assessment. So the peer assessment looks like this, right? So it's a Word document. What you will do is you will put your name, right? And then you are going to rate your partners or partner from 1 to 4, right? So 4 is they did really well, so outstanding, right? 3 is above average, 2 is average, and 1 is poor. And you're gonna rate them based on these 5 categories, right? So how effective did they contribute to the completion of the project? So how did they contribute to the documentation, to the testing, things like that? How effectively did the team member apply their technical skills and expertise to the project? How effectively did the team member communicate and collaborate, right? So were they active, in sharing ideas, they give feedback, things like that. How responsible and reliable were they, right? So when you all decide to meet, did they attend the meetings, they communicated however you communicated on Zoom, the video call, if you assigned activities amongst yourselves, did they complete the activities? And then finally, how much initiative and proactiveness did they demonstrate? So were they actively trying to enhance and improve, enrich your projects, right? So you just put your partner's name here, right? If a group of 3, you put 2 names, and then you read from 1 to 4, actually, right? So 1 to 4. I need to update that. Okay, so that's 1 to 4. So I will update that in the sheet. Okay. Next, right. Oops. Right, so continuing. Right. So next we have the written report, right? So this is a group submission. So you all will submit 1 report per group, right? If you want to, you could submit the same report individually, right? That's if you want, but 1 submission per group is fine, right? So the format, you'll have a title page with the usual stuff, right? Title, course, your names and IDs, etc. We'll have a table of contents. Then in terms of the sections, first you will have an introduction where you have an overview, or you discuss an overview of the report, meaning what is this report going to cover? Now you sort of introduce it. For the test scope, right, you're going to talk about the coverage for the test. So what functional areas, what features or modules based on the application you will have to test, and then you will discuss any assumptions or limitations in your testing. Now, before you could do this, right, you will have to, let's just say, explore the application a little bit, right? So you'll have to load the application and you will have to see what functionality is there, what it can do, what it potentially can do. Okay, so it is very open in terms of what you all are able to write on. Now, the application is for testing. So there are some errors in its application, or don't be surprised if you encounter certain aspects not working as it should, right? That is usually, you just deal with it appropriately. So that would be like a failed test case, for example, right? Okay, responsibilities. So generally talk about what each team member would be responsible for, right? The teams are very small, so there will be overlapping responsibilities, and that's fine, right? It's just to demonstrate that you're able to identify different roles and the persons who would be kind of assuming the roles. Next is the testing strategy, right? And for the testing strategy, we're going to you're going to get into the different testing methods we discussed, right? So earlier in the course, we spoke about the different types of white box and black box testing methods. So, decide on which ones you all will apply and then justify why you would apply it, right? So explain what it is, what's the reason for selecting it. So, you're not going to say you do white box testing, right? Or black box testing. You're going to go into the different types of testing, exploratory testing, right? Boundary testing, partition testing, things like that, right? So get into the details of that. The next thing is entry and exit criteria, right? So you will define conditions before starting and completing testing. So we spoke about the exit criteria, the stop criteria, right? So you're going to define when you're going to stop testing, whatever you decide on, and then what you're going to define or what you're going to look at to begin the testing, right? So certain things must happen for you to do the testing. You might need to get guarded tools. You may need to ensure the environment is set up, for example. So things like that. Before you start testing, what do you need? Next, as we spoke about the environment, is a test environment. So what hardware you need to test, what software and what tools, what applications you need to employ to test, to execute the test cases, right? So as part of that, there's a document setup. So there's an installation and test data preparation. So for example, in order to do testing, you all need the application, right? So that is some software you need. So you need the sales and management application. So that's one thing. And in terms of the setup, like what we have here in the file, you could say, well, you extract the files and you open it using the Python IDE and execute the main.py, right? So that's an example of your document steps for setting it up, right? Also, if it is you have data that you want to test with, right? So you decided you want to enter data in the inventory, or you want to enter some different users, etc. That data you would put in. Okay, so that's your environment. Testing approach, right? So in the testing approach, you want to explain how your tests will be performed, right? So what steps you're going to do, whether you're going to write a script, right? So it's going to be manual, you're going to click on the sales item from the menu. You're going to enter some data. You're going to click on the inventory item. You're going to search for a product, etc. Right? So what are the steps? Right? And then you're going to describe steps. You're going to describe processes for regression testing. Right? So we spoke about regression testing, and that's basically if there was some issue that needs to be resolved, you are going to test afterwards to ensure that the solution works as it should. We spoke about defect reporting, right? So how it is defects will be reported, and then test case status reporting. what are the processes that you think would be suitable for the testing phase. Next, features that you want to test and features you will not test, right? And why? Okay, so you may test adding items to the inventory, removing items, right? You may not want to test having stress testing with multiple concurrent users in the application, for example, right? So, think about it together as a team and decide on what you want to test and, what you will not. But with some justification, and justification could be multiple things, right? So it could be timeline, right? It could be availability of application, etc., right? Okay, next is, right, so schedule and timeline. So what you want to do is you want to create a Gantt chart, right, for the activities, testing activities. So create a Gantt chart and put in the different activities, of course, over the, what do we have, about 4 weeks, right? So for the project. Right, so the couple of weeks you put in activities and then how we want to execute it, etc. Right, so for this you would submit a Gantt chart. Next is risks and mitigation. So any risks that you foresee in the project and how you propose to mitigate against those risks. Right, after that you're going to do, well, this is like one of the major part of it. This is the test cases and results, right? So for this part, you are going to document test cases. So I say at least test cases, right? You could do more if you want, but I want 10 well-documented, solid test cases for the application, right? And ensure it is in a proper format. Now, you could use a table format, right? But if let's just say your steps are very lengthy, and when you put it in a table, it's the column makes the text span multiple pages. You could put it in a paragraph sort of form, right? So it doesn't have to be a table in that case. But ensure that it has a test case ID, a description. You want to have what data is input, steps you're going to execute the test, what is the expected result, and then when you execute the test, what is your actual result. Okay, and then based on that, whether the test passed or failed. Now, your tests do need to be diverse, so it needs to cover both white box and black box approaches, right? So that means the different types of white box testing and different ones, right? Yeah, good question, Mark. So 10 test cases mean 10 different tests, right? So don't use a test like, okay, you're logging with the admin user, it's test 1, you're logging with Joe as test 2, logging with Eve test 3, right? So 10 different test cases, okay, testing different functionalities, right? You want to test positive pass scenarios and negative fail scenarios. And what that means? For example, login. If you log in with a valid username and ID, that is a pass scenario because you know that login is valid. You also want to test a fail scenario. So you want to log in with an invalid username and ID, for example, right? So you want to have both pass scenarios and fail scenarios. So things that you want to ensure that things that should work works and things that should not work does not work. Right now, when you execute the tests, you will capture screenshots, right? If that is applicable, or log any data to record the results, right? Again, if it is your results can be put in the table and it's presented well, that's good. If it is you need some more space and you realize that you could put it in a paragraph form, that is also fine, right? So you don't need to do the table, depending on how you plan on documenting your work. Okay, so it's a bit flexible. When you finish that, you do a brief conclusion, summary of your findings. What did you think about the application? In terms of the coverage of the tests, how many passed, how many failed, etc. And lessons learned, what features you think should still be developed, what issues you find. You might find security issues, performance issues. Okay, totally up to you to decide. If you do reference anything, right, if you have any external references, please use the appropriate APA guidelines for citing the sources, right, and create a reference list. You could include an appendix, right, for supporting information that is too detailed or lengthy. Okay, so if it is you have multiple screenshots for tests, you could include the main one in the body of the report and include any sort of complementary screenshots in the appendix, right? Just clearly, label your screenshots, your code, diagrams, whatever you'll do, proper documentation is great, right? If you do programming, you could put snippets of code in the body of the report, and if you have any lengthy piece of code, you put that in the appendix. Okay, so what you want to do is you want to include all the sections in the report when you submit. Do not leave out any sections, right? In order to give yourself the opportunity to get most marks. Okay. In terms of formatting, the usual stuff, right? So use the same font, type, and size for the documents. You put diagram and figures. Ensure that it is properly labeled, right? And reference. Include page numbers. And if you use referencing, if you do reference external sources, ensure your referencing is done well, right? These are the same code guidelines that you would have adhered to in your assignments. Okay, so you follow the same ones. And that's it for the report. Okay, so one report per group. Next is the presentation, right? So you're going to present with some PowerPoint slides and you're going to demonstrate. So each group will do a brief 10 to 15-minute presentation and you're going to summarize your plan. Some of the things that you should cover are the introduction, your scope, the strategy and approach, and the test cases and results. You want to talk about your challenges you face and then sort of conclude. And what you will do as part of the presentation is you will demonstrate 4 test cases. So how did you execute these test cases? What I would recommend is when you select those 4 test cases, ensure that it is diverse, right? So don't do only white box testing cases, do some black box testing cases. If you decided to use any sort of applications or you wrote any programming code, you could execute one of that also, right? So make it a diverse set of cases. Okay, so that is your second sort of assessment part. Right, so the third one is the group peer assessment, right? So I showed you the form, right? I will update that form yes, I'll update that form because it has 1 to 5 in the second part. So it has changed to 1 to 4. Right, so each student must complete and submit this peer evaluation form. Right, and then there'll be an instructor assessment where I will overall assess the your project itself. Okay, so in terms of the deadlines, right, for submission, the report is due on the 19th, which is down to the end of the semester. So this is planned to be the second to last week of class, right? So aim to finish your reports on the 19th, right? We will start the presentations on the 19th and we'll probably do presentations and demonstrations for 2 weeks, right? You probably split up the sessions in 2 weeks. So we'll do on the 19th and the 26th. Okay. You'll also have to submit the presentation slides and the group peer assessment by the 26th. Now, the 26th is the last day of class for the semester. Right, yeah, so the presentations and stuff, we will do it online. Right, I think that is I think that's better. Well, anyone prefers to do it, wants to do it in person, or you're okay with the online?
Online is fine for now, I would say.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I think online is should be okay. So, what we'll do, yeah. So that's on the 26th is the deadline to submit those bits of information, right? Now, as I said, the 26th is the last scheduled class for the semester. So I will not be seeing you after that. So please, please submit all your work by the 26th, right? To prevent me trying to get in contact with you, because you might be busy with other things, getting stuff ready for the end of the semester, right? So I'll keep reminding you of that. Right, so try to, yes, so submit all your stuff in PDF format. You could PDF your slides, right? And the peer assessment, right? So if you go on Canvas, let's go back to Canvas. Yeah, if we go on Canvas, yeah, in the assignments, right, there are, right, so there are three items, so shells open for the report, presentation slide, and the peer assessment, right? So the report would be, the requirement is one per group. If all the group members want to submit, it's fine. Same thing for the presentation slides, one submission per group, but the peer assessment is individual submission, right? So don't forget that, right? That's individual. All right. So yeah. So that's that. Okay, and then finally, in terms of the in terms of grading, the report is going to be worth 55% of the overall grade, right? So in this particular assessment, we are going to assess heavily, or it's going to be heavier on the reporting part of it, right? The first couple of assessments were based on the testing and then your programming, using the automation with the PyTest and Selenium and the unit test. This one will focus more on the report. You're gonna also be assessed on the presentation and the slides as 15%, demonstration 10%, and then the peer assessment, structure assessment 10%. All right, and that is that. Any questions on this so far?
So far, no.
All right, yeah. So we will discuss as the weeks go on, right? We could discuss any doubts you all may have, or any clarification. But I want to assign that to you all today so you could start working on it, because time goes by so quickly. You really have, let's see, 1, 2, 3, like 4, about five weeks, right? So as I mentioned before, try to work on it consistently in your groups. Right. Speaking of groups, let me just record who is working with who as a just 5 groups. Okay.
Recording
Right.
stopped.
Pause the recording here, right? Let me set up the groups and let me share so everybody can see. So if I remember correctly, Kayla, you wanted to work with who? Was it Ethan and who was the other person? Is Kayla there? What is that there? All right. Okay. In the meanwhile, who's the other group? Anybody?
So me and Aaron Lewis.
Okay, Raheem and Aaron. I think that's not Azaria, you're gonna say?
Yeah, I was gonna say me and Michael Williams.
Michael. Yeah. We should do it like this. Make sure I don't forget. Okay, okay, I have Aaron, Azaria, Sharice. I'll just do it for the order.
So me and Shivan and Rampasad.
Okay, let's see.
So don't forget with Mia's Kayla, Ethan, and Gabriel.
Gabriel, right. I was
You
trying to
should
remember
do-
who was the third
yeah.
person.
Yeah, sorry about that.
All right, Shivanan Rampasad, Darius. You will be looking at who? Okay, Jonathan. Great, thanks. Jonathan, and we have, okay, Ethan is there. Kayla is there. Liam. Who you
Yes,
working with?
sir. I'll be working with Nilan.
Milan. Then I have Mark. Mark, you decided who you're working with?
I don't really know anybody in this class.
All right. All right, let me just go down the list, all right? Mark, Michael is working with Azaria. Milan is working with Liam. Nivedita. Nivedita, who are you working with? There. Rahim is working with Aaron. Okay, good. And Sachin, are you here?
Yes, sir. I also don't really know anybody in this class.
No. Okay. Just go down and see if Shivanan, Jawahir.
Yes, sir.
You decided who you're working with?
Not yet. I could work with anyone. That's okay with me.
Okay. And then finally, I think we have Zachary. Zachary, have you decided to work with?
No, sir, I don't know either.
All right. Okay, so we have here, that is, okay, so we have Mark, maybe, we missing someone?
That's me.
Gideon, all right. Gideon, who you decided who you're working with or not yet?
Same thing here.
Okay, so this is who we have, right? All right, so you have these 6 persons. So you all want to make a decision now? And just let me know. You want me to just assign you all to somebody? Yeah, Mark, Nivedita, Sachin, Shivanan, Zachary, and Gideon.
I think the most fair thing is for you to just assign them, you know, sir.
I just want to do it.
It doesn't really matter to me either.
I just going to do it in order, right? Because okay, so I'll put Nivedita back, right? And I'll put Sachin with Shivanan, Jawahira, and Zach, you will put Gideon.
All right, sir.
All right, sir.
Okay, great. Okay, so we have the groups. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 7, 9, 9. Okay, good. Yeah. Right. So we have the groups. Right. We have the stuff online. Okay. And yeah, so you all can start discussing it with within your groups. Right. As I say, start discussing it early. Because for this particular project, you have to, there's no project requirement document that you're given. So it's open. No, you use the application and you make a decision in terms of what you think is a higher priority feature to be tested or functionality, etc., and report on it. All right, and that is that. So yeah, so the application will have errors in it, right? You just test. If you get an error, you report on the appropriate way. Okay, right. Assignment 1 and 2, just a reminder, anyone who didn't submit, just remember, right? Especially assignment 2, the shell closes off for that tonight. So those persons try to submit by tonight in assignment 2. All right, I think that is it. Gideon, you holding on a few minutes to discuss?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good. Okay, if Michael, you want to discuss something also?
So the peer assessment, you said it was from 1 to 4, seeing the rating from 1 to 5.
Yeah, 1 to 4. I need to change. I need to update it, and I was going to put back the document. So I'm going to change it to 4.
Oh, it had to change to 4. Okay. I don't
Yeah,
prefer.
I
Wait,
just
wait, sorry. Wait, sorry. Cool.
Yeah, I'll update that, right? I'll do that tonight. I'll try to do tonight. Yeah. Right. So if there are no questions, everyone, I'll see you all next week, right? Have a little bit of a long weekend, extended weekend coming up. So everybody enjoy the weekend, right? Have a good night, and I'll see you all on Wednesday next week.
Same to you, sir. Enjoy the
Thank
long
you.
weekend.
Thanks. Good night, everyone.